my speaking. All of my friends, sometimes they laugh at the way I speak because it's different. Back then, I was learning English, and I'm hard hearing, so I speak different than all my hearing friends. That was tough. Back then, I didn't know the culture, the community. There's nothing. It's only like recently, like 3-4 years before, then I thought, okay, now I have the identity. But back when I was growing up, I was unknown, and it was hard. It was confusing, and it felt like weird. But I wish like I had like this memory, get that memory that was like, well, looking back, I'm proud of just like so many banks. Like it's really hard, more teaching, more like exams.